Yes, and hello. Today is October 30th. Happy Halloween. We could go and talk a lot about the origins of Halloween, which of course are very European. Uh, and as much as I would enjoy that, we probably should talk about the age of enlightenment and the age of reason. Okay, so let's get down to business. Now we're talking about the Enlightenment Encyclopedia. But the most monumental work that typified the Enlightenment was the Enlightenment Encyclopedia. Now, you all hopefully know what an encyclopedia is, although they're not nearly as used as much as they used to be. You know, when I was a kid, my mother gave me the greatest gift without knowing she gave it to me. She spent, and I remember it cost her $100, which was a lot of money. She bought us a set of World Book encyclopedias. And I couldn't read at the time. I was like 5 or 6, but they quickly became my best friends. And I know that sounds terrible, but you know what? No, it doesn't. I looked through some, and one of them, I remember the A, had all these pictures of animals. And so I just started looking through them and slowly began to learn how to read them and would spend hours, just a lot of times, flipping pages and sucking it up, literally. Yeah, does that sound sad and nerdy? Probably. And you know what? I don't care. It was, to be honest, it provided me a way out of the life that I had. But yeah, it was compiled by Denis Diderot. And an encyclopedia is simply a book or series of books that compile knowledge. Okay? The Enlightenment Encyclopedia was the same thing. It was a bunch of volumes that basically contained the knowledge of, particularly of the Enlightenment thinkers. It was compiled by Denis Diderot and Jean de Rambert. It had 17 volumes of text and 11 volumes of what it says plates. It means pictures. Photographs, no, pictures. More than 100 authors who had been solicited, and of course, all the major philosophers: John Locke, Jean Jacques Rousseau, the Baron de Montesquieu, Voltaire, of course, etc., etc. It included the most advanced critical ideas of the time on religion, government, and philosophy, but they had to be careful because, they often, what they would do, it says to avoid official censure, meaning that the French king was very sensitive to what could be said that could be critical or controversial. And it says to avoid censure, the ideas often had to be hidden in obscure passages of articles. In other words, they'd be writing about something else, and oh yeah, down here is a little treatise on freedom. Can't have that too much. It had still illustrations of manufacturing, canal building, construction, and improved agriculture. It was an important source of the knowledge about 18th century social and economic life. The articles on politics, ethics, and society ignored divine law. Divine rights of kings theory need not apply, and concentrated on humanity and its immediate well-being. It looked to the classics of Greece and Rome instead of Christianity for intellectual and ethical models. Now, that little sentence there has a lot of stuff in it. The thinkers of the Enlightenment thought that the most intelligent people the world had ever seen were the ancient Greeks and Romans. And they wanted to emulate them. And the thing about it was they did. They emulated everything they did. But if you recall, the Greeks and Romans did not have the Judeo-Christian Muslim ideas about morality. I watch it, you. Yeah. You say, well, what does that mean, Mr. Horton? Well, if you recall anything about many of the Romans were Epicureanists. You say, what does that mean, Mr. Horton? Well, Epicureanism was a philosophy, and it was a philosophy that actually began in Greece, but became known through the Roman Empire. Epicureanism um, basically held out the idea that, the original philosophy held out the idea of a person should go through life and avoid pain. However, when the Romans got the philosophy twisted over time, and not only did it include avoiding pain, but increasing pleasure. Bottom line, Epicureanism came to mean if it feels good, do it. Drink as much as you can, alcohol, party as much as you can, eat as much as you can, and more. Have sex with it. If it feels good, do it. And many of the thinkers of the Enlightenment kind of bought into that. For example, the aforementioned Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau became something of a ladies' man in France, and he obviously had lots of relationships, we'll call them. And during the relationship, the female would become expecting, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau would take the child and drop it off at the nearest foundling hospital and then go about his merry way. We'll learn about foundling hospitals later on. In Paris, the survival rate of infants at foundling hospitals, because it was a common occurrence, the survival rate at foundling hospitals in Paris was 10% for abandoned infants. They just had too many of them. They were overrun. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau just kept on going out and, So that's what it says. So instead of looking to Christianity, they looked to ancient Greece and Rome. Like I said, the Greeks and Romans were hedonists. If it feels good, do it. The good life, as it says, was in the here and now. See, that's part of the Enlightenment thinker. You don't think about that much. The good life was in the here and now. Benjamin Franklin, who lived in this era, considered himself to be an Enlightenment thinker. Benjamin Franklin was quite an amorous character, and when he served as ambassador to France, he spent a lot of his time chasing females. I don't know what they saw in him, to be honest, but who knows? Anyway, was in the here and now and was to be achieved through the application of reason to human relationships. And see here, that is one of the fallacies of the Enlightenment, the application of reason to human relationships. Human relationships, by their nature, Mr. Arlinghouse, are illogical, are not rational. Love is not rational, as Mr. Arlinghouse could tell you. So is hatred not rational. And so logic does not apply to human relationships. Love, hate, those kind of things. And yet you cannot deny that they are part of the human condition. So, for many but not all philosophers of the 18th century, ecclesiastical institutions, churches, ecclesiastical religions, were the chief impediment to human improvement and happiness. I hope you now get that idea that the thinkers of the Enlightenment and organized religion, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, didn't like each other. Voltaire's Crush the Infamous Thing summed up the attitude of a number of philosophers toward the church and Christianity. Almost all varieties of Christianity, but especially Roman Catholicism, because Roman Catholicism was so powerful still, owned lots and lots of property. Roman Catholicism was still quite influential in government, and the philosophers just didn't think this was fair. The clergy taught that humans were basically depraved human beings the humans were basically depraved, becoming worthy only through divine grace. And of course, divine grace came through the church. And of course, the philosophers said, that's just wrong. What makes you know things? According to the doctrine of original sin, meaningful improvement of human nature on the earth was impossible. See, that is the stance of organized religion. The philosophers said something else. Mired in conflicts over obscure doctrinal differences, the churches promoted intolerance and bigotry, inciting torture, war, and other forms of human suffering. What does that mean, Mr. Horton? Well, if you really study church history, and I'm not just talking about Roman Catholic Church, I'm talking about all religiosity, all religious history, religious fanaticism, religious extremism, you will find that, yeah, there have been more murders committed in the name of God for the love of Jesus and all sorts of things than almost any other cause that there's been. And oftentimes the doctrinal differences are so tiny. For example, one of the worst religious wars occurred in Russia, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, where the issue at hand was how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. And people died over that. And of course, wars of Catholics versus Protestants. And there were of course atrocities on both sides, Protestants versus Catholics, Protestants versus other Protestants. And oftentimes the ones who got picked on the most were the members who, by their conviction, chose not to fight back, such as the Amish and the Mennonites and the Quakers. Anyway, the churches were deeply enmeshed in the power structure of the old regime. That means that there were a lot of members of the church who also were members of power of the government. They, members of the church and the church, owned large amounts of land, collected tithes, 10% from peasants, before any secular authority could collect its taxes. The upper clergy in most countries were relatives of aristocrats and were heavily involved in politics, serving in the British House of Lords and advising the various princes across the continent. Basically, it's just saying that the churches, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, were heavily entrenched in the people who control everything, the governments. And the Enlightenment thinkers really hated that. The philosophers were responsible for the birth of a quasi-religious movement called Deism. You know, Mr. Arlinghouse, that's when you took World Civ under me. And while you never failed the course, you also never could get your grade up to a C. Hence, I said you were afflicted with Deism. Bum, bum, shh. I bet you got a laugh out of that, didn't you, Mr. Arlinghouse? So, the philosophers sought a religion without fanaticism and intolerance, a religious life that would largely substitute the authority of human reason for the authority of churches. Yeah, reason for the authority of the church. In fact, the most serious attempt to establish a deist religion was the cult of the supreme being during the French Revolution, and as part of that movement, Notre Dame, the grand church in Paris that hopefully they'll put together one day, its name was changed from Notre Dame to the Temple of Reason. Newton had convinced many writers that nature was rational. Therefore, the God who had created nature must also be rational, and therefore religion through which that God is worshipped should also be rational. And see, once again, this is how deism was formed. The earliest Christian work, Christianity Not Mysterious by John Toland, promoted religion as a natural and rational rather than a supernatural and mystical phenomenon. In other words, this Toland guy writes this book that says religion should be natural, rational. It should make sense according to logic and not be about, God and a God who creates miracles, a God who does all these things. God moves in mysterious ways, etc., etc. Deists regarded God, once again, as kind of a divine watchmaker who had created the mechanism of nature like a giant clock, set it in motion, and then just walked away. Yeah. And once again, there were lots of famous deists. The aforementioned Benjamin Franklin. Thomas Jefferson was an ardent deist. I talked about him already. And he took the Bible and took his scissors. And, yeah. Deists regarded God. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Two major points in the deist creed about religion. The first, the deist, and this is a test question, deists are not atheists. Deists are not atheists. Deists believe in God because, this universe, the universe they could already conceive with nature, lion eats the antelope, lion die, and also the plants doing this right here in perfect harmony. This universe works so well together. Somebody had to create it. And so, yeah, you see, they couldn't conceive of any other thing that it had to be created by somebody. So, first, there was a belief in the existence of God. Deists believe in God, which they thought was proven empirically by the existence of nature. I mean, somebody had to create this nature where on the Galapagos Islands there are 12 varieties of finch, you see. And everything, seems to work in perfect harmony. There's always enough creatures to eat and not more than enough creatures to eat them, you see. Pardon me. There is also a belief in life after death, when rewards and punishments would be meted out according to the virtue of the lives of people on earth. Deism was empirical, once again meaning questioning, logical, tolerant, reasonable, and capable of encouraging virtuous living. Deists hoped that their faith would gain following and end religious strife. Also remove the Church of the Supreme Being, the deist religion, remove the need for priests and ministers because priests and ministers occupied a higher plane than most people. And see, that was what grind their gears. They thought that the Roman Catholic Church and other churches bred inequality because priests are here, everybody else is here in their mind. Okay. Roman numeral 8. According to the philosophers, religious toleration was a primary social condition for the virtuous life. Religious toleration. See, it's one of the positive things. Voltaire took the lead in championing this cause. Voltaire used to say, I may not agree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to be wrong. Voltaire made the case of Jean Calais, a man accused and tortured and strangled, eventually, in other words, he was accused, for having murdered his son to prevent the son from becoming Catholic, and made it his own cause celebre. Even though Voltaire hated the Catholic Church, here, this child was going to become Catholic, and his father murdered him to prevent him from becoming Catholic. He says that's nut. Voltaire says that's crazy. It's wrong on so many levels. One thing, not just the murder of the son, but also the accusation, torture, and strangulation of another man. Cruel and unusual punishment. He published Treatise on Tolerance and hounded the authorities for a new investigation. The case against the dead father was reversed, which did the dead father absolutely nothing. No good at all. Voltaire said the case illustrated the fruits of religious fanaticism, which is true. Later in the century, Gotthold Lessing, wrote the book Nathan the Wise, which sent a plea for tolerance for not only Christians, but for non-Christian denominations as well. A man ahead of his time, because most of the philosophers, and we're writing, most of the philosophers were anti-Semitic. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Roman 9. Some philosophers did not desire not only to make Christianity more tolerant, but to attack Christianity outright. Voltaire routinely questioned the truthfulness of priests and the morality of the Bible. Interesting idea. The morality of priests, the truthfulness of priests and the morality of the Bible. And so you see, as we're going to see, if you really read the Bible, and I mean really read it, particularly in the Old Testament, there are some very immoral things that are promoted as God's will. For example, in the Old Testament, I believe it's in the book of 1 Samuel, where the first king of Israel was a guy named, not David, Saul, Saul. And Saul was ordered by the prophet Samuel, through God through the prophet Samuel, to go to this particular town, and I don't remember the name of the town, and he was to kill every living creature in the town. They were sinful, whatever, and he was to kill every living creature, and I mean man, woman, and child, and all the animals in the town. And so he goes about to carry out God's order, murdering every man, woman, and child in the town. And then he comes upon the fact that these people owned a lot of cattle. And Saul said, wow, it's a shame that all these cows would have to die. I mean, need cows. Maybe if we just sacrifice some of the cows, and I could keep the rest. And yeah, in doing that, in not killing everything, Saul loses his birthright for his son to continue on and be the next king of Israel. The next king of Israel will be David, but it's because Saul didn't do that specific thing, meaning killing everything in the town. And that killing everything, every human being in the town, was God's will, according to the story. And so that's why Voltaire questioned the morality of the Bible. Not just that, but there are other instances. For example, the prophet Jephthah. Jephthah was a judge. He was a judge in the book of Judges. And I can't remember the exact story, except that there was some people, probably the Philistines, who were harassing the children of Israel. And Jephthah is chosen to lead the children of Israel, the Jews, Hebrews, against their enemies. And Jephthah, promises God that if you give me victory upon my return, I will kill the first thing that comes out to meet me. And the first thing that came out to meet him, Chicago. Yes, here we go. And this is a statue that I saw in the Art Institute of Chicago when the rest of you guys were watching the Blue Man Group. The title of this statue is Jephthah's Daughter. And as you see there, Jephthah, see what's in her hand here? This is a tambourine. Jephthah's daughter, when her father returned, was so excited that she grabbed her tambourine and she ran out to meet him, singing. And as you can see here, she's just been told what's going to happen. Yeah. Interesting story. Yeah. The question is that, is that the morality that, is that the morality, there we are, that, the Age of Enlightenment was attacking? Yeah, that's that Voltaire was attacking it. So, Scottish philosopher David Hume, in his Inquiry into Human Nature, argued that no empirical evidence supported the belief in divine miracles central to much of Christianity. Basically, he's saying that if you've read the Bible, the stories of the Bible, went to Sunday school, a lot of miracles. I mean, goodness, Jesus turning water into wine, Moses parting the Red Sea, Prophet Elisha calling down lightning to burn up a sacrifice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, lots of them. David killing Goliath. Anyway, for Hume, the greatest miracle was that people actually believed in miracles. Edward Gibbon, who wrote one of the longest books you ever want to read, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, attributed the rise of Christianity to natural causes rather than the influence of miracles and piety. In other words, Edward Gibbon said, Christianity is the world's largest religion then. It still is now. Why? Because of natural causes rather than the fact that it's the religion, So, Roman number 10. The philosophers criticized not only Christianity, but also Judaism more vehemently, even though they sponsored religious toleration. Once again, if that pops up on your test, yeah, most of the philosophers were anti-Semitic. So, some philosophers criticized Judaism as more primitive than Christianity. Certain Enlightenment philosophers allowed certain Jewish intellectuals to rethink the relationship of Jews and their place in Jewish life. Baruch Spinner and Moses Mendelssohn were two Jews who were members of the Enlightenment. Spinner said in his book Ethics that closely identified God and the nature of the spiritual world and the material world. During his lifetime, the controversial character of his writing led both Jews and Protestants to think of him as an atheist. At 24, he was excommunicated by his own synagogue. A synagogue is a Jewish temple, and lived apart from the Amsterdam Jewish community. Spinoza believed the Hebrew Bible provided Jews with divine legislation, but not specifically theological knowledge. He called on Jews and Christians to use reason in religious matters and to read the Bible like other ancient books. Moses Mendelssohn was called the Jewish Socrates. I swear I've seen that somewhere in a test. I just can't remember where. So, the Jewish Socrates pushed for the assimilation of Jews into modern European life. In other words, the ending to Jewish discrimination against Jews. Mendelssohn argued for the possibility of loyalty to Judaism, misspelling of the word, Judaism, combined with adherence to rational Enlightenment values. Mendelssohn's most acclaimed work, Jerusalem on the Ecclesiastical Power in Judaism, where he argued both for maintaining the religious distinction of Jewish communities. He felt that government should be religiously neutral and Jews should enjoy the same civil rights as other religions. Mendelssohn felt that Jews should also tolerate each other's religious differences because what most people don't know about Jews is that there are just as many varieties, well, not just many, but many varieties, many sects of Jews who disagree with each other, just like there are many sects, S-E-C-T-S, of Islam, who differ on the interpretation of Islam. Vehemently so. He felt that government should be religiously neutral and Jews should enjoy the same civil rights as other religions. He hoped for the toleration of Jews within the broader non-Jewish European society and toleration by Jews of a wider spectrum of opinion. In other words, Jews should not be discriminated against by non-Jews, and Jews should not discriminate against each other for having philosophical or religious differences. Okay. The philosophers wrote a lot on religion, but humanity was the center of their interest. 5 more minutes, okay? Hang with me 5 more minutes. The philosophers were thinking of men, not women, when they framed their reformist ideas. Trust me. There will be a test question on that very thing. Yeah, the philosophers were not women's equal rights amendment guys. They were sexist. The idea of the social science originated, they said, with the Enlightenment. Social science, yes. Philosophers hope to end human cruelty by discovering social laws and making people aware of them. These concerns are most evident in the philosophers' work on law and prisons, which is a good place to end. Okay? Yeah, let's end there. pick up with Roman numeral 12 tomorrow, shall we? And so, yeah, I'm going to go. I'll see you tomorrow. No, I'll see you Monday. Happy Halloween.